This battle report may contain content that isn't suitable for younger audiences and that some people may find distressing, such as descriptions of violence, particularly gruesome descriptions of death, or spooky skeletons. If you think there's a chance it may contain something you would find unpleasant, please check the description below for a quick list of everything in the video. Despite their efforts to drive out the cult of pleasure, the worshippers of the Lord of Excess, Slaanesh, continue to thrive within the societies of the Dark Elves. Under the protection of Marathi, mother of the Witch King Malekith, the cult continues to grow and expand its influence. But even as they grow, the ranks of those in opposition continue to swell, as the pursuit of excess consumes and destroys countless elves. One such elf was Vesha. A beautiful woman, she attracted the attention of the lustful members of the cult, and they set out to bring her into the fold and use her in their pursuit of excess. When at last she fell, it wasn't long before she was consumed by the excess. Over the course of months, her relationships decayed, and soon she was dead, killed in an orgy of pleasure and pain. Her brother, Dellor, was enraged by this. He had watched her fall with great concern, and when at last she died, he was consumed by grief. Heeding the teachings of the bloody-handed god Cain, Dellor's grief was soon forged into hatred. As a noble of the Dark Elves, he had several magical artifacts at his disposal. Chief among them was a sword of ruin, capable of cleaving through steel like it was paper. With this weapon, he cut down those who had taken his sister from him. Even as they all lay dead, Dellor found his hatred was not satiated. He contemplated aiming higher, striving to cut down all who stood with the cult, but even that, he knew, would not bring him relief. It was not the cult he hated, but the ruinous power behind it. And so he assembled a small group of men who shared his grievances, and set sail for the Chaos Wastes with a simple mission. They would kill the Prince of Pleasure himself. All knew it was a fool's errand, an impossible task that would see their death. But with their hearts consumed by grief, it was all they could do. They landed in the frigid lands in the north of the world and set off to find their prey. It wasn't long before they were found instead. Urosk Firebane had always been considered a handsome man. He turned the heads of women and men alike. Those not charmed by his beauty were impressed by his martial prowess. So beloved, it was no surprise that he would develop an impressive ego. One might even call it excessive. Indulging in his love of himself, it wasn't long before Urosk fell to the clutches of Slaanesh. The Dark Prince was quite taken with him, and doted upon him the whip of pleasure, and pushed him to call together a great host to prove himself as a champion. Chaos warriors and knights came when he called, and even Daemonettes answered his plea, seeing the favor Slaanesh had bestowed upon him. When Dellor came seeking vengeance, they shared this news with Urosk. He knew a man hell-bent on destroying Slaanesh would make a fine gift for his master, and so Urosk set off to capture or kill the Dark Elf. The two crossed paths at a narrow pass filled with rocky outcrops and frozen lakes. Only one of them would be leaving. This would be the first step of Dellor's vengeance. Today's game is a 500-point game of Warhammer Fantasy 6th Edition Warbands, played between Dark Elves and Hordes of Chaos. As is becoming the norm, the deployments were handled in tandem, while the first turn was rolled for. Dark Elves rolled a 5 and looked to be going first, until Chaos rolled a 6, securing the first turn. The Chaos forces are led by Urosk Firebane, an aspiring champion of Chaos with the Mark of Slaanesh and the Whip of Pleasure. He is accompanied by a unit of 9 Warriors of Chaos, upgraded to Chosen and equipped with shields and a Mark of Slaanesh. Standing beside them is a unit of 5 Daemonettes, and on the far flank is a pair of Knights of Chaos with no upgrades. Opposite them, the Dark Elves are led by Dellor, a Dark Elf noble wearing heavy armor and a Sea Dragon Cloak, and carrying the Blade of Ruin. He joins a unit of 11 warriors with shields. On his left flank stands 5 Corsairs, and on his right are 10 Executioners. Between these two large blocks of infantry sits a Reaper Bolt Thrower. The bolt thrower is a bit of an odd choice for the narrative. However, after the raid on Salethion, and the repeater bolt thrower in that game never getting to fire, I've been wanting an excuse to use one again. I know one of my viewers was also disappointed they didn't get to see it in action, and since the Dark Elf and High Elf bolt throwers are nearly identical, this was the first chance I've had to put one on the table and fire it. The game begins like most others, with the Chaos Forces marching with all units directly forward. The Knights take position in cover behind some rocks, but the other two units move directly for the two gaps in the pass, trying to close in as quickly as possible. This haste proves necessary, as the Dark Elves make no move to meet them. The Corsairs pivot on the spot a little to be ready for the Knights, but the rest of the formation holds their ground while the bolt thrower fires. It shoots 6 shots at the tough Chaos Warriors, but only manages to kill 2 of them this turn. The second turn is similar, with the Chaos Forces continuing to advance. The Daemonettes cross one of the frozen lakes, the ice cracking and threatening to break. While most would find this unnerving, or for demons, at least a little concerning that it might inconvenience them, the Daemonettes giggle and laugh at the threat, the risk of the ice breaking proving an interesting and surprisingly thrilling experience. The Knights on the flank come around to threaten the Corsairs, who issue a war cry and charge at them. Behind them, their kinsmen reform ranks, ready to face the oncoming Chaos Horde. The Knights are heavily armoured, and the blades of the Corsairs bounce off the thick metal. One Corsair manages to leap up beside a Knight and drive his blade down from above, slipping between the helm and breastplate and piercing his neck. The other Knight swings and cuts down a Corsair with his inhuman strength. It's not enough to win the fight, but his nerve holds. The bolt thrower fires at the Chaos Warriors, but fails to slay any more of them. It doesn't get another chance to fire at them, as in the next turn the Daemonettes charge the Dark Elf Warriors, and the Executioners charge at the Chaos Warriors. The Daemonettes inflict a single wound on Dellor, bringing him close to death, while 2 of his fellows are struck down. He swings back with the Blade of Ruin and slays 2 of them, while his men cut down 2 more. This is enough to break the final Daemonette's grip on the mortal realm, and she is dispelled back to the Chaos Plane. The warriors surge forward in victory, before reforming in the next turn to threaten the Chaos Warriors' flank. While this is going on, the lone remaining Knight cuts down a Corsair, and his Chaos Steed knocks down and tramples another. The Corsairs fail to do any damage in return, and are sent fleeing. The Knight runs them down, just in time to be exposed to a volley of fire from the Reaper bolt thrower. 2 bolts find their mark, one hitting his chest, while the other skewers his neck, killing him instantly. In front of the bolt thrower, the Executioners engage with Urosk. The Whip of Pleasure allows him to strike first and make an additional attack. With his onslaught, he easily kills 3 of the Executioners, enough to deny them the chance to fight back. The lone Chaos Warrior able to strike kills another one. Despite these losses, the Executioners hold strong this turn. 2 more of them fall in the next turn to Urosk's whip, and the unit is sent fleeing. Urosk's men give chase, and they run straight into the crew of the Reaper bolt thrower. This leaves their rear exposed to Dellor and his warriors. They charge, and Dellor's Blade of Ruin easily cuts down 2 of them. The Chaos Warriors, meanwhile, only kill a single member of the bolt thrower's crew. After such a shameful display, and being caught in the rear by a more tightly packed and numerous enemy, the Chaos Warriors flee. Dellor gives chase, and he catches the fleeing unit. While his warriors overrun the servants of the Dark Powers, Dellor personally strikes down Urosk, piercing his heart with the Blade of Ruin. Though he stands victorious over the battlefield, Dellor feels no satisfaction. Even knowing that he slew one of the chosen of his foe, his hatred and lust for vengeance remains unsatisfied. He takes the Whip of Pleasure and orders his men back to the boat. With the losses they've suffered today, it's clear that they'll need a bigger host to accomplish his goals. But with this trophy in hand, he may yet rally such a host. Before we look at the tactics used, if you enjoyed this battle report, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more. Every bit helps the channel grow and ensure there are plenty more Warhammer battle reports to come. Tune in next week for the battle on Kizzard Ridge, a 500-point Warbands game between two forces of orcs and goblins. At only 4 turns, this battle might be the shortest one of Warhammer Fantasy I have played. Technically, Operation Skulltaker was also 4 turns, but the last turn ended in the movement phase, so it's definitely shorter. Despite being so short, I think this game had a lot of little choices that were interesting to look at. The Chaos side didn't have much nuance to it, nor much room for nuanced decisions. Without any ranged attacks, the only thing they could do is move forward and push to engage the Dark Elves. That said, the way they deployed their troops did make for interesting decisions on the Dark Elf side. In an ironic twist, there was one very dangerous situation that loomed over the Dark Elf forces. That was Dellor coming into base contact with Urosk. That would allow Urosk to challenge him to a duel, which would leave him with no winning moves. Declining would mean that his men would be fighting without him and lose a lot of their offensive punch. Accepting would almost certainly spell his doom, as Urosk would always strike first. With that in mind, the Dark Elf forces played to avoid that scenario, focusing the warriors on killing the Daemonettes first, and engaging the Chaos warriors not just on the flank, but specifically on the side that Urosk was furthest from. That second part wasn't intentional. When deploying the Chaos warriors, I mixed up my math on the macro, and he got placed wrong. I didn't think it would matter, but as it turned out, it did a little bit. My only regret is that in Warband scale games, bolt throwers never get to fire their main attack. At most, you'll get 2 hits. When compared to the 6 attacks, the math just doesn't seem worth it to me. Though, I suppose they did only kill 2 Chaos Warriors anyway, so perhaps firing normally would have been wise.